Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans, and soon they will be available to everyone.
This vaccine means hope. It will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
I want to go back to work and I want to be able to move around.
To visit with Michelle's mom, to hug her and see her on her birthday.
You know what I'm really looking forward to is going to opening day in Texas Ranger Stadium with a full stadium.
We've lost enough people and we've suffered enough damage.
In order to get rid of this pandemic, it's important for our fellow citizens to get vaccinated.
I'm getting vaccinated because we want this pandemic to end as soon as possible.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
So roll up your sleeve and do your part.
This is our shot.
Now it's up to you.
One of 8 people with severe reactions from the Johnson&Johnson COVID vaccine right here in our area.
Georgia has halted giving the Johnson&Johnson vaccine incoming, and our state isn't alone.
My limbs started going numb. My face went numb.
Sarah Moore says she's still processing the last few days being bedridden after having a frightening reaction to the Johnson&Johnson vaccine.
It's scary because, passing out once is not my concern. It's, passing out multiple times and then having 103.5 degree fever for the remaining 2 days after that.
She is one of 8 people who had an adverse reaction on the same day at the same DPH site at the Cumming Fairgrounds.
Within 2 to 3 minutes, I knew that I was going to pass out. My vision was going out, my hearing was going out.
The DPH paused Johnson&Johnson vaccines at the Cumming site. DPH Commissioner Dr. Kathleen Toomey says they are looking at what may have caused the reactions, including the conditions at the fairgrounds, such as heat and the ability to keep the site cool. Heat, Sarah says, has nothing to do with it.
It was not hot out. It was not even 70 degrees, I don't think. I was in a hoodie and jeans and felt very comfortable, not hot.
Sarah says after initially passing out, she awoke lying across 3 chairs and saw another person feeling extremely ill.
There was a girl about 15 feet away from me, and she was getting transported out on the stretcher.
Colorado, Iowa and North Carolina also suspended Johnson&Johnson vaccines at least one site because of reactions. The CDC responding tonight with this statement saying the CDC performed vaccine lot analysis and has not found any reason for concern. Right now, they are not recommending health departments stop administering any lots of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, Sarah tells me she passed out a total of 3 times during her ordeal and that she doesn't have any previous or underlying health conditions. She said if she had her time over, she would consider another vaccine or waiting for more research to come out.
So what are the most common immediate side effects for Johnson & Johnson? Well, according to the CDC, signs of a severe allergic reaction can include difficulty breathing, swelling in your face and throat, a fast heartbeat, a bad rash all over your body, dizziness, and weakness. A severe allergic reaction would usually occur within a few minutes to 1 hour after getting a dose of the vaccine.
1.5 million vaccines have been administered here in Georgia. Governor Brian Kemp announced over 3 million Georgians have received at least one dose. That includes 80% of seniors, those 65 and older. But today we learned Georgia is among 4 states looking into adverse reactions to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine.
In Georgia, Colorado, North Carolina, and Iowa combined, there have been reports of more than 45 adverse reactions to the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That includes 8 people who had reactions at the Cumming Fairgrounds site on Wednesday, out of 425 J&J shots that were administered that day. TPH says it is looking into what may have caused this, including whether conditions at the site may have been too hot, but emphasized there is no reason to believe there is anything wrong with the vaccine itself.
Here and there may be, by coincidence, a small cluster of nausea or something like that, and it gets widespread attention. I think this sort of thing is happening in more or less in most clinics across the country, no matter which vaccine is being given.
The CDC says these are some of the reactions you may experience, but adds it hasn't found any reason for concern and is still encouraging sites to keep administering the shot. One doctor we spoke to today offered another reason why we could be seeing these reactions now.
Older people don't respond as well, and so they don't have these reactions. As now we're vaccinating younger people, their immune system responds very quickly to these vaccines. So we're seeing more of these reactions.
Young people like 20-year-old Sarah Gant, who says within the hour of getting the J&J shots, she was calling paramedics.
My fever went up to 104.3 and I was having chills and shakes and just body aches, felt really bad. And this morning, it took me forever just to get out of the bed.
Johnson & Johnson says it's sharing these reports with the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and other health authorities.
News now. The production of Johnson & Johnson vaccines has been delayed after a factory mix-up. The New York Times is reporting the mix-up happened at a plant in Baltimore that was manufacturing 2 coronavirus vaccines. The article cites workers accidentally mixing up the ingredients. The Food and Drug Administration is now investigating.
As of today, overall, more than 112 million Americans have received at least one dose. And more than 66 million adult Americans are now fully vaccinated. That's more than 1/4 of all adult Americans that are now fully vaccinated. That's up from less than 1% when we came into office 11 weeks ago. And on Johnson & Johnson, the company is working closely with the FDA to resolve any manufacturing issues at the immersion facility in Baltimore and to secure FDA authorization. Johnson & Johnson is installing a new senior leadership team to oversee all aspects of production and manufacturing at the facility. And Johnson & Johnson will have full responsibility for the operation and will leverage the expertise of Merck as well.
And I think that vaccines have to be considered the bargain basement technology for the 20th century.
50 years ago, when Morris Hilleman was a high school student in Miles City, Montana, he went on to pioneer more breakthroughs in vaccine research and development than anyone in the history of American medicine. Among the discoveries he made at Merck are vaccines for mumps, rubella, and measles.
Tell me how you found SV40 in the polio vaccine.
Well, that was a Merck thing. Okay. Yeah, I came to Merck, and I was going to develop vaccines. And we had wild viruses in those days. Remember the wild monkey kidney viruses and so forth. And I finally, after 6 months, gave up. I said that you cannot develop vaccines with these damn monkeys. We're finished. And if I can't do something about it, I'm going to quit. I'm going to try it. So I went down to see Bill Mann at the zoo in Washington, D.C. And I told Bill Mann, I said, look, I got a problem. I don't know what the hell to do. Bill Mann is a real bright guy. I said, these lousy monkeys are picking it up while being stored in the airports in transit at these loading, offloading, loading. He said, very simple. He said, you go ahead, get your monkeys out of West Africa, get the African green, bring them into Madrid, unload them there. There are no other traffic through there for animals. Fly them into Philadelphia, pick them up. Or fly them into New York and pick them up right off the airplane. So I brought African greens in. I didn't know we were importing AIDS virus at the time. So what he did, he brought in, we brought in those monkeys. Now we had those. And this was the solution. Because those monkeys didn't have the wild viruses. But we had all of these...
Why didn't the greens have the wild viruses since they came from Africa?
Because they weren't being infected in these group holding things with all the other 40 different viruses.
But they had the ones they brought from the jungle, though.
Yeah, they had those, but there were relatively few. What you do is you have a gang housing, you're going to have an epidemic transmission of infection in a confined space.
Oh, is that the problem?
So, anyway, the greens came in. Now we had these, and then we're taking our seed stocks to clean them up, and God, now I'm discovering new viruses. So I said, Judas Priest. Well, I got an invitation from the Sister Kinney Foundation, which was the opposing foundation, and that was the live virus.
Oh, right.
Yeah, they had jumped on Sabin's bandwagon. And they had asked me to come down and give a talk at the Sister Kinney Foundation meeting. And I said, it was an international meeting. I said, God, what am I going to talk about? I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk about the detection of non-detectable viruses as a topic.
There were those who didn't want a live virus vaccine. They concentrated. The National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis concentrated all its efforts on getting more and more people to use the killed virus vaccine, while they were supporting me for research on the live virus vaccine.
So now I got to have something, that's going to attract attention. So I thought, gee, that damn SV40, that vacuolating agent that we have, I'm going to just pick that particular one. That virus has got to be in vaccines, and it's got to be in Sabin's vaccine, so I quickly tested it. Sure enough, it was in there. And
I'll be damned.
So now, so I go ahead and...
So you just took stocks of Sabin's vaccine off the shelf here at Merck?
Yeah, well, it had not been made at Merck. It was made at Merck.
You were making it for Sabin at this point?
Yeah, it was made before I came.
Yeah, but at this point, Sabin is still just doing these massive field trials? Okay.
In Russia and so forth. So I go down, I talked about the detection of non-detectable virus. Now, I told Albert...
But at this point, Sabin is still just doing these massive field trials? Okay.
In Russia and so forth. So I go down... I talked about the detection of non-detectable virus. Now, I told Albert, I said, listen, Albert, I said, you and I are good friends. But I said, I'm going to go down there and you're going to get upset. But I'm going to talk about a virus that's in your vaccine. Now, you're going to get rid of the virus. Don't worry about it. You're going to get rid of it. But, so, of course, Albert was very upset with me.
What did he say?
Well, he said basically that this is just another obfuscation that is going to upset vaccines. And I said, well, you're absolutely right. But I said, we have a new era here. We have a new era of a detection. And the important thing is to get rid of these viruses.
Why would he call it an obfuscation if it was a virus that was contaminating vaccines?
Because, there are 40 different viruses in these vaccines anyway that we were inactivating. And...
But you weren't inactivating his, though.
That's correct. No, that's right. But yellow fever vaccine had leukemia virus in it, and, this is in the days of very crude science. So anyway, I went down and talked to him, and I said, well, why are you concerned about it? I said, well, I'll tell you what, I said, I have a feeling in my bones that this virus is different. I don't know why to tell you this, but I've been around biology a long time. I just think this virus may have some long-term effects. And he said, what? I said, well, cancer.
I love it.
And
I love it.
said,
Go ahead.
No. I said, Albert, I said, you probably think I'm nuts, but I just have that feeling. Well, in the meantime, we had taken this virus and put it into hamsters. So we had this meeting, and that was sort of the topic of the day, and the jokes that were going around was, gee, we would win the Olympics because the Russians would all be loaded down with tumors. This is where the vaccine was being tested. This was humorous.
Right.
So, and it really destroyed the meeting. You know, it was a big international.
Yeah, right.
So it was sort of the topic. No. Anyway.
Was this the Cancer Society meeting in New York? Cancer
No,
Society?
this was the Sister Kennedy.
Oh, the Sister Kennedy. Right.
And Del Becco got up and said that he foresaw problems with these kinds of agents.
Why didn't this get out in the press?
Well, I guess it did. I don't remember. We had no press release on it, obviously. You don't go out. This is a scientific affair within the scientific community. This is a scientific affair within the scientific community.
An historic victory over a dread disease has dramatically unfolded at the University of Michigan. Here, scientists usher in a new medical age with the monumental reports that prove the Salk vaccine against crippling polio to be a sensational success. It's a day of triumph for 40-year-old Dr. Jonas E. Salk, developer of the vaccine. He arrives with Basil O'Connor, head of the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis, which financed the tests. Hundreds of reporters and scientists from all over the nation gather for the momentous announcement.
It was too much of a show. There was too much Hollywood. There was too much exaggeration. And the impression in 1957 that was, in 1954, that was given was that the problem had been solved, that polio had been conquered.
But anyway, we knew it was in our seed stock for making the vaccine. That virus, you see, it's 1 in 10,000 particles is not inactivated by formaldehyde. It was good science at the time because that was what you did. You didn't worry about these wild viruses.
So you discovered it wasn't being inactivated in the Salk vaccine?
Correct. So then, the next thing you know is 3-4 weeks after that, I found that there were tumors popping out in these hamsters.
And Johnson & Johnson will have full responsibility for the operation and will leverage the expertise of Merck as well. Johnson & Johnson expects a relatively low level of weekly dose delivery until the company secures FDA authorization. With FDA authorization, the company also expects a cadence of up to 8 million weekly doses in total across state and federal channels later in April. Importantly, Johnson & Johnson has also reiterated its commitment to provide at or near 100 million vaccine doses by the end of May. When you talk about the doses being down significantly week to week, I think it's important to remember that a week or two ago, Johnson & Johnson actually delivered 11 million doses all at once. So that we got into the market immediately. This past week, it was closer to, I think it was just under 2 million doses. So that's the decrease that you talked about, and that's the fluctuation that we expect until they are able to get through the FDA process and open the additional plant.
Encouraging news from the CDC on schools and children, and we know the child infection rate is low, but it has increased a bit over the last couple weeks, about 16%. What is that about?
What's happening basically is, as we've seen large outbreaks in the country, the last month or so, we've seen some very, very large numbers of infections. Kids have been getting more infected too. I don't think it's anything different. I don't think it's the new variant, for instance, playing a role. I think it is the part of a broader pattern of more people getting infected.
Overall, we are seeing some good news. Hospitalizations down over the week, cases down over the week, and now we do seem to be in something of a race between these vaccines and the variants.
Absolutely. This is the issue in front of us. These variants, particularly the UK variant, which is widespread across our country, is really starting to increase in cases. And it's going to wreak havoc on our hospitals unless we can get lots of people vaccinated very carefully and very quickly, So this is the race in front of us.
Some doctors now saying that everyone should be wearing these N95 masks to protect against mutations.
Yeah, in the ideal world, we would have had plenty of N95 masks. Again, we've known about N95s and their value for over a year. We've never really produced them in big enough numbers to have most Americans have access to it. There are alternatives, KF94s from South Korea, KN95s. They're not quite as good, but they're still an upgrade. Most people probably do need to upgrade their masks, especially right now with this variant.
Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine are both messenger RNA vaccines. And then we now have a third one from Janssen, also the Johnson&Johnson company, which is a different format. It is an adenovirus vector vaccine. Adenovirus vaccines are not really new. We have already used them for things like the Ebola vaccine. An adenovirus vaccine is a virus that has been altered so that it can't make you sick, it can't replicate, and it has a special bit of genetic code that has been inserted into it that in this case causes your body to make the spike protein.
Maine just saw the most vaccinations given in one day last week, but now you're going to see 88% fewer J&J vaccines this week. How does that impact your vaccination push?
The decrease in J&J vaccine that we are going to be experiencing next week here in Maine and across the country, it's disheartening. Of course, we all would have wanted the same robust level of vaccine supply that we saw coming in this week. But this decrease, let's hope it's one that's temporary, a mid-course fluctuation that will hopefully rectify itself. We're not letting it slow us down here in Maine. In fact, starting tomorrow, we are launching the use of a mobile unit that will travel across rural parts of the state using the limited supply of J&J vaccine that we have to make sure that we are continuing our two goals, not just to vaccinate with velocity, but to also vaccinate with equity. And we're working with federal officials to get a better sense. But even the decrease that we are seeing this week was one that was planned. Our federal partners let us know not too long ago that there would be a decrease, and we were able to plan for it. I guess even
comes out of it, but J&J does not make any money off the vaccines, everybody. They make money off their company. And I think people should recognize that drugs were really fantastic. The healthcare business and people, they don't use a lot of e-commerce. They really need to get back in that channel. But it's real good. But the pause, remember, is not a halt. It's an adverse effect. We hope they know something in the next couple of days.
Jim, they have a similar delivery of the vaccine payload. They use the adenovirus to deliver the vaccine payload. And again, I'm no expert in this stuff, but that's what AstraZeneca also does. And so they had that a case of transverse myelitis.
We don't know what
the
this person
AstraZeneca.
had.
Now, they've resumed the AstraZeneca trials everywhere but in the United States, where they haven't.
We don't know.
And so there might be some concern there, Jim, if this is, we don't know what it is, but if this is another case of that, is it related somehow to the way that the vaccine payload is delivered?
I try to figure out whether it's the person. I said, is it the person did the person have the placebo? Well, we don't know.
So you're not getting any answers?
I'm getting no answers.
Yeah.
More concerning news about the AstraZeneca vaccine tonight. Provinces have been advised to stop using it for people younger than 55 until more reports of blood clots in Europe are looked into.
You'd be forgiven for asking, what is going on with the AstraZeneca vaccine in Europe? In January, there were bitter words about delays in its supply. There was an insistence that the EU would act as one on vaccines. And President Macron questioned how effective it is for older people, while the European regulator cleared it for use. Then in February, it became clear many AstraZeneca doses in the EU were yet to be used. And now in March, some EU countries, including France and Germany, have acted on their own and suspended its use without waiting for the European regulator. That's prompted this senior global health researcher to say the decisions by France, Germany and other countries look baffling. Now, they wouldn't use that word, but this is what's happening, and here are the reasons why some are baffled. Last week, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia suspended the use of AstraZeneca's vaccine. A small number of people out of several million had experienced blood clots. The decision was taken despite the WHO and the European Medicines Agency both saying there's no evidence of a link between the vaccine and blood clots. Also last week, Italy suspended the use of one batch of AstraZeneca because a soldier had a cardiac arrest. Now, it's very rare for a particular batch of a vaccine to be a particular problem. There was no evidence of a link between the cardiac arrest and the vaccine, and AstraZeneca has run its own tests and found no issues. Now, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, Ireland and the Netherlands have fully suspended this vaccine's use. Here's the German health minister.
The German government is suspending vaccination with AstraZeneca as a preventative measure. This is due to new cases of cerebral vein thrombosis reported in connection with the vaccine.
Now, these countries are pointing to Norway, where 4 people, 3 of whom are under 50, are being treated in hospital. The medical director of the Norwegian Medicines Agency says they have very unusual symptoms: bleeding, blood clots and a low count of blood platelets. They are quite sick. We take this very seriously, as of course does everyone. But then we have this from AstraZeneca's chief medical officer, who says around 17 million people in the EU and the UK have now received our vaccine, and the number of cases of blood clots reported in this group is lower than the hundreds of cases that would be expected among the general population. That's right, the rate of blood clots is lower than we'd expect anyway, which is why some argue these suspensions are the wrong approach.
We have people dying across Europe, cases going up in many European states, a faltering vaccination programme with high levels of vaccine hesitancy already. And they are not looking at the downsides of the suspension. Once this suspension has happened, rebuilding public trust may be impossible.
We continue to be very confident about the programme, and it's great to see it being rolled out at such speed across the UK.
The former UK government advisor here says this is painful to watch and a total failure of proportionate regulation. The point being that you cannot apply this level of scientific caution when your vaccine has a reputation issue, despite it being found to be safe and effective, and there's a pandemic that urgently needs to be tamed.
According to the Israeli Health Ministry, some 189 people tested positive after receiving their Pfizer vaccine, and about 6.6% of those have tested positive. Now, according to reports, about 69 people had even had their second jabs of the vaccine.
The US-based company Pfizer is holding governments to ransom, interfering with their legislation, even demanding military bases as guarantee. It has vaccine deals with 9 Latin American countries: Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama, Peru, and Uruguay. Talks between Argentina and Pfizer began in June 2020. Pfizer asked to be compensated for the cost of any future lawsuits. Say someone files a civil lawsuit against Pfizer in Argentina, and if that person wins the case, who pays the compensation? It won't be Pfizer. It would be the government of Argentina. To define negligence more clearly, to include only vaccine distribution and delivery under negligence, Pfizer was still not happy. It demanded the law be amended through a new decree. That's when Argentina put its foot down. They refused. Pfizer then asked Argentina to buy an international insurance to pay for potential future cases against the company. Argentina agreed. In December 2020, Pfizer came back with more demands. It wanted sovereign assets as collateral. Pfizer wanted Argentina to put its bank reserves, its military bases, and its embassy buildings at stake as collateral. Pfizer wanted Argentina to put its sovereignty at stake for what? Just to secure vaccines. Say you receive a vaccine from Pfizer, you have adverse effects because of the jab. You can always go ahead and file a lawsuit against the company. And if you win that lawsuit, instead of Pfizer, it will be the government that will be compensating you. And this is a normal practice. Pfizer went a step ahead and asked Brazil to create a guarantee fund and deposit money in a foreign bank account. Brazil waives the sovereignty of its assets abroad in favor of Pfizer.
China's top disease control official has said the country is formally considering mixing COVID-19 vaccines as a way of further boosting vaccine efficacy. Available data shows Chinese vaccines lag behind others, including Pfizer and Moderna, in terms of efficacy, but require less stringent temperature controls during storage. Gao Fu, the director of the Chinese Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Saturday, said the current available vaccines, quote, don't have very high rates of protection, adding, quote, inoculation using vaccines of different technical lines is being considered. Gao said that taking steps to optimize the vaccine process, including changing the number of doses and the length of time between doses, was a definite solution to the efficacy issues. China has developed 4 domestic vaccines approved for public use, and an official said on Saturday that the country will likely produce 3 billion doses by the end of the year. A COVID-19 vaccine developed by China's Sinovac was found to have an efficacy rate of slightly above 50% in Brazilian clinical trials. A separate study in Turkey said it was 83.5% effective. No detailed efficacy data has been released on vaccines made by China's Sinopharm. A World Health Organization panel said in March that both vaccine makers have presented data on their COVID-19 vaccines indicating levels of efficacy in line with those required by the WHO. China has shipped millions of its vaccines abroad, and officials and state media have fiercely defended the shots while calling into question the safety and logistics capabilities of other vaccines.
Meanwhile, investigators with the World Health Organization now saying Chinese officials refused to give them information they needed to try to determine the origins of the coronavirus.
And yes, it's becoming ever more clear, if you listen to the World Health Organization, that China was not transparent when their team was on the ground and they withheld critical data. And so those big questions, what did China know when this outbreak began and what did they do about it, they still remain. The WHO team have called their trip to Wuhan, China, tense and frustrating. One key disclosure was that the COVID outbreak was in much wider circulation in Wuhan in December 2019 than previously thought. But China refused to share the raw data with the team, including hundreds of thousands of blood bank samples. Instead, the team had to rely on second-hand analysis of data provided by the Chinese. On Saturday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan called for China to be more open, saying, "We have deep concerns about the way in which the findings of the COVID investigation were communicated and questions about the process used to reach them. It is imperative that this report be independent, with expert findings free from intervention or alteration by the Chinese government." There's also growing concern now about how China has weaponized and disseminated COVID misinformation, including a rumor that it was the US who created COVID. A 9-month-long investigation by the Atlantic Council shows that China played a lead role in spreading misinformation and conspiracies about the deadly virus.
It's time to get that daily news. I ain't watching TV, I'm a log on the YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Talking about that raw, uncut news. You a fool. You believe in mainstream and local news. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. And 411, keep the 411. On a sensitive subject, keep it 100, don't bite no tongue. If you cannot take the truth, then this is finna hurt. Who's to say if it's a round or a flat earth? Stick to the facts, what's some feelings? I don't do no capping. Read that paper, seen that news, now you know what happened. Playing a pretty picnic, but they control that weather. Same crisis actors, like we don't know no better. Thing about the truth, always come to the light. Problem is too many, all bark, no bite. Like muscle, no might. I don't know what happened to them, but I know the way they...
It's definitely mixed. There's some hesitation, but I'm glad because as it's pushing forward, you see a lot of the skepticism kind of leaving.
Say somebody ain't right. It's time to get that daily news. I ain't watching TV.